Benji, Brady, and our higher up listeners, welcome in to episode 22. 22.
Love it. We were just talking before we came on the show today that, you know, we are our listeners and streams have gone, they're going up and up and up. So we just can't thank you guys. I think we're in 84 different countries now, guys. Yep. 84 countries. I don't even know how many cities across the world. So just thank you to our listeners again for tuning in. We've got some really good content. And also, I think some of you may be wondering, like, where are we getting this content from? You're going to hear a really good topic today. But these are things that our business actually is going through. So don't think that we're just coming up with this stuff like pie in the sky, trying to make this up. No, it's actually things that we are going through that we wanted to be able to help small, medium, large-sized businesses. You can apply these principles anywhere, anytime to what you may be going through in your business. And these are real-life situations. So don't think that, again, we just came up with them. We did not. We actually are going through these ourselves. And we want to be a help and a resource to you.
Yeah. So today we're talking 10x is easier than 2x. Not to be confused with 10 times is easier than 2 times. Y'all had to basically set me straight on that.
It is an X. It is an X.
That's okay, though. You know, Adam, it's good because 10 times, if you think about that, some people say add a zero. You want to add a zero to everything you have, right? Well, it's easier to 10x. 10x is easier than 2x. Not 10 times is easier than 2 times.
So, so Brady, I know you brought this up probably several weeks ago when we were planning out some episodes. So I know this is something that you've been wanting to discuss and talk about. So when they hear that 10x is easier than 2x, kind of talk a second about what is that? What does that mean? You know, what is that phrase to someone that may not fully understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you think about that 10x is easier than 2x, is it really? Like, how can I, whatever lens that you're using, like what is it that I want to try to 10x? And so this actually came from a book that I read last year. It's called 10x is easier than 2x. Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. We'll include the link in the show notes so you guys can get the book. But Dan Sullivan has run an organization called Strategic Coach for many, many, many years. Learned a little bit about them last year, but he wrote this book, and it's just a way to change the way that you think, right? How do we expand the way that we think? And it's actually going to probably be a little bit different than what you guys are thinking. But as we go through today in this episode, what I want you to ask yourself a couple questions. Like, when we talk about 10x is easier than 2x, what does that look like through your lens? Okay, so does that mean 10x revenue? Does that mean 10x profit? Does that mean 10x amount of time? You know, or how to maximize your time. Mm-hmm. So whatever it looks like through your lens is kind of what we want you to be thinking about. So here's the question to start us out with.
Hey, Brady, let me ask you one thing first. Because again, I want to give a real life situation. When you brought this up to our team in one of our weekly meetings, I think we had everyone kind of look at us, go, what are y'all talking about? 10x versus 2. Like, what in the world do you mean by that? Because to your point, the first thing that everyone thinks about is revenue. That is the first thing they think about. And how can I add a zero? So again, real life situation, we did the exact same thing.
Yeah, because when y'all said it, my first thought was, okay, what does the phrase mean? My thought was, well, it's easier to do things with more, right? Like, you have 2x, but if I had 10x, I could do more things. So for me, in my position,
we're gonna talk about that, Adam.
Mine's revenue, not as much profit. I'm still in my first 2 years of my business. I'm not really looking to have a huge profit because right now a lot of the things I'm doing, I'm trying to like build my gear, things that I can use. Because I need to be able to do bigger jobs. So for me, like, mine's revenue. Like, that's where I feel like I'm at. That's where I'm with 10x.
Well, I think we're going to help you out today, Adam. Maybe blow your mind a little bit. So
yeah, I'm ready. I need it.
So here's the question: what if we're thinking too small? Okay, what if instead of working harder for smaller gains, you ever heard the term like work smarter than harder?
Oh yeah.
Well, that's kind of the concept that we're talking about today. But you know, and again, whatever lens that you're thinking about 10x is, think about, have you ever got into the 2x thinking and why, right? So that's the first question of the day. Like, what if you had one of these big ideas, one of these big visions, one of these things that you just want to go out and conquer the world, like what's holding you back? And so maybe today will help you. And listen, if you might be in business, you might be a leader of some sort, or like I said, you may want to just get some of your time back. What does that 10X look for you? So I don't think this is just necessarily a business conversation. I mean, it does have a lot to do with business, but not necessarily specifically with business. So this is kind of the crux of it is incremental thinking. All right. So most people have 2X thinking because it feels really easy to do. It feels really achievable. Most business leaders, when we go through like our strategic planning, which we've talked about, we say, okay, well, we did X amount of revenue last year and we want a 15% growth. Okay. Which, Benji, we've done for years and years and years.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And that's kind of the way that we thought about it. Well, we're not putting a time frame on it, but if you think about 10X, then, okay, well, instead of, let's just use $1 million, okay, $1 million of revenue, instead of, just doing, let's say a 10%, so we got $1.1 million, then what if we shoot for $10 million over the next 5 years or whatever the time frame may be? When you start to think about that in your brain, then it says, okay, well, how do I do that? Like I've got to change the way that I think in order to try to accomplish something that big. Okay. So, and really it's an upside down thought, because the way that we do this and what we're going to talk about is you have to start thinking about making things more simple. Don't make them harder.
Yep.
But make them more simple. And the thing about this incremental thinking is a lot of times we feel like that, I know I do, I can resonate with this as a leader, is sometimes I got to get in the weeds. Like I got to get in there and know what's going on. And it's, you know what, Adam, and I'm the only one that can fix it, So what 10X does is helps us get out of the weeds, maybe not completely and totally, but it helps us get out of the weeds so that we as leaders can think about the things that are those big topics. So,
well, you even said like, how do we take? You've asked me, Benji, is that the best use of your time? Brady, is that the best use of your time? If it is the best use of your time and that's the role that you play, by all means, do it. If it's not and that's someone else, to your point, doesn't mean you have to not get in the weeds. You just don't let it be someone else's weeds. Let them take care of that. That's the 10X thinking is how is it going to benefit me to help us get to the 10X again, whatever that means for us specifically.
Yeah. So, I mean, why do you guys think that most people, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but why do you think most people gravitate toward the 2X thinking instead of the 10X thinking?
I 100% think it's the what's the easiest way to get what I need, right? Like what's the most achievable, like Benji said, what's the best use of my time? What can I do that may not take up a lot of time? And I know I think like that more often than I should. How do I get to my end result faster? Which sometimes is good, but I feel like sometimes also could mean if you're trying to get to your end result faster, your quality may diminish. And so for me, I think that the 2X, that's where I'm always at, just because I'm pulled so many different directions. And a lot of it's my fault. I'm trying to do a lot of things, full-time business, or a full-time job, trying to run a business on the side, trying to be a dad, trying to be a husband, all these different things. So sometimes I think smaller because I'm like, all right, what is easier for me in this moment? What do I need right now to achieve what I want to do versus, okay, what do I need to do to set myself up for down the road, which is really what I should be thinking, less now, more. And you've taught us that for years, 5 years, 10 years down the road.
It's very, that's exactly what I was going to say, Adam. A lot of people focus, and we're just as guilty, me included, think about the now versus what does it look like if you could still apply those same little principles and look forward to the next 2, 5, 10 years versus today. That's the difference in 10X and 2X thinking.
Well, it's also what makes me feel comfortable right now, right? Like nobody likes uncomfort. Nobody likes to feel like they're not in control. They don't like that discomfort. But I mean, I know it's cliche to say it, but you hear it all the time. Diamonds are made out of pressure, and that's where it is. Like, okay, I need to be dealing with uncomfort right now. Like, you don't grow in the comfortable. Like when you go to the gym and you're doing that last set, those last reps that you hate, that are burning, that are hurting.
Yeah.
That's where you're growing at. So I think maybe that's the mindset. Because and the reason I say maybe that's the mindset people have is because that's the mindset I know I have. Is that I need to be uncomfortable. A few weeks ago, I went and filmed a commercial project for a pretty large company here in Birmingham. And I kept telling Emily, I was like, I'm scared to death to do this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't even know why I signed up for this. I'm supposed to go, and I was working.
But you had
with
to make it seem like you did.
I know. I was working
to
with
act
some
confident.
models. Oh, I was trying to be, and that's the thing. Like when you're talking to your clients, inside I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Why am I? But I've got to show that confidence. But I was very uncomfortable, even in the moment, even while I was filming. But I knew I needed to do it if I needed to expand my portfolio, if I wanted to show that I can do more than church videos, or, like I've done a lot of service videos for you guys. I need to show that I have a wide variety. So it's just that I think that's another reason too, is people, they feel comfortable with 2X. They don't want to feel uncomfortable with the 10, even though the 10's where I feel like they need to be if they're going to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a, I don't know, for some reason, I was sharing this with our team, but for some reason, like over the past couple of years, I've become somewhat of a history buff. And so I subscribe to the History Channel on the Apple TV, and there's, I know that sounds kind of nerdy.
It really does.
But there's some really cool things that we can learn. I mean, obviously, and history was not one of the subjects like in high school that I just, woke up in the morning and go, hey, we're going to study history today. I hated it. But I think as you get older and you mature, that there's some things that you're like, man, I wish I would have maybe paid a lot more attention to. But there's this series on the History Channel called The Men That Built America, okay? And then there's a sequel to that called The Titans That Built America. And this is like the turn of the century. You hear about Cornelius Vanderbilt and Rockefeller and Carnegie and all these people. Now, listen, I don't necessarily agree with like the people that they were and some of the things we hear about them, but as far as 10X thinking, these guys were, I mean, they thought not 2X. They probably didn't even think 10X. They probably thought 100X.
Oh, yeah.
But a great example was Henry Ford, okay? So what did Henry Ford do? Were there cars that existed before Henry Ford? Absolutely. But he had a vision that every single person in America could have a car that was affordable to drive. And so what he did is he went out and said, you know what? I got to make this to where it's cheap enough. We can manufacture it cheap enough. And he designed a manufacturing process that people still use today. It's called the assembly line process. And so he had this vision, this 10X vision that said, this is what I want to do. I can't get caught in the weeds. And now I need to create a process that helps catapult us into the future. And I think we're seeing some real live examples of that even today. But that's kind of the gist of what 10X is, because here's the basic thing with 2X. If you only aim for 2X, you're basically carrying everything forward that you're doing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay? So day to day, week to week, month to month, and really it's the good stuff, which is okay, but it's also the bad stuff.
Filling the calendar up with things that may be unnecessary.
Yep. Okay? So what 10X does is it forces us to simplify, and we're going to talk about cutting the unnecessary so that we can focus on what truly drives results. So we're not looking for incremental, we're looking for exponential. So let's talk about kind of how that works. And this is where the power of 10X thinking comes in. And listen, we can only give you guys really a snippet of what 10X is. Highly, highly, highly encourage you guys, go out and get the book.
Yeah.
Read the book. If you're like me, listen to the book. But
Did you listen to it in 1.5X?
I think 1.25.
Sped it up.
I feel like 1.5 can be a little a little tough to consume.
But if I would have listened to it at 10x, I would have got done with it a whole lot quicker. But
you probably wouldn't have heard
it. Probably
either.
wouldn't have worked. So here's the core principle of 10x. 10x is not about doing more.
Yeah.
Okay? 10x is not about doing more. What 10x is doing the right things more often. So think about that. The right thing more often. We've talked about this, I know, in a couple of episodes before, but you as a leader, like, what is your job as a leader? And it's really to lead your people, right? But sometimes we as leaders, are we leading people or are we managing tasks?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, listen, we've talked about the working genius before. I'm a high T, so tenacity is one of the things I love to do. I like getting things done, but that's not my role as a leader. I should be leading people. Now, and here's the question that we asked our leadership team, Benji, a couple weeks ago. We said, do the math.
Yep.
Okay. So what is the math? Does 1 times 1 equal 1? Or does 1 times 1 equal 100? Now, Adam's looking at me going, now, what in the world are you talking about?
He don't know
learned
how
that
I
in
am with
school.
math. So I'm like,
So, Adam, here's the question for you. Okay, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. If you talk to one person, if you influence one person, how does that multiply? Is it just for that one person? You know, so the conversation that you're having, a meeting that you're having, does that influence just that one person? So that'd be a 1 times 1 equal 1. Or if we want a 10x, then kind of like what we're doing here on the podcast is we're having this conversation that's going to go out to 100 people, 1,000 people, however many. So we're having one conversation that hopefully influences a lot of people. That's where you do the math, and that's where 1 times 1 equals 100. So I know it's Wednesday, Adam. You know, it's the middle of the week, hump day. But did you understand that math?
I did.
Okay. All right.
So look, from a digital marketing standpoint, I'm here for, like, to me that makes 100% sense because you're talking about everybody thinks about it differently. You know, you're just like, all right, so if the three of us are having this conversation here, so my thought is, all right, so we need to create quality content that's going to go out, so that way multiple people are consuming it. Yep. Well, we can't just throw a podcast out there and throw some SEO words in it and just hope people find it.
Yeah.
We've got to build a website. We've got to build, we got to have social media. We got to have, a couple reels each week. Just hopefully somebody trickles on it, finds it, and they're like, oh, hey, what's this? Let me check out the podcast. Yeah. So for me, I'm starting to think about it in that perspective, like, all right, if we're going to do that, and I do have one conversation with someone, what do I need to do in that moment to multiply the influence that's coming, even if it's a one-on-one? What am I doing to be able to increase the amount of people that are consume or have any type of influence over what we're talking about?
Yeah. Yep. So that's doing the math. And that's really the core of what 10X is again, simplifying. Okay. So let's build on that simplification. All right. You guys have probably heard of the Pareto Principle. All right. You see this in business. You see this in leadership. You see it in church. You see it in giving, tithing, whatever example. But the Pareto Principle is the 20% of what you do that drives the 80% of your results. Okay. We hear about this all the time in church. Probably 80% of the giving is done by 20% of the people, right?
I was just about to say that when you said that for me is the terminology I've heard it in is that exactly.
Yep. So that's called the Pareto Principle. So if we take that and apply it to ourselves, is okay, am I focusing on, like what Benji said earlier, is that the highest and best use of my time? Okay. So what is the 20% that I need to do that yields 80% of what I need it to do? And this one's tough for me because I'm a little bit of a control freak, right? I like to hold on to stuff. And what I've got to learn and what I am learning is I've got to let go and let other people do it. And a lot of times, guys, honestly, when I do that, they actually do a better job.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I've always thought that, oh man, if I want something done right, I got to do it myself. Mm-hmm. But as a leader,
I was
Yeah, go
going to
ahead.
say, Brady, as the leader too, you're right. You think you have to do it all the time, but you pass it off to someone. That doesn't mean you still don't give vision behind what you want done.
Yeah.
You as a leader still have to cast the vision. You still have to hold people accountable, but they take it, and honestly, they'll probably get back to the same, end point that you would have gotten to.
Yeah.
But you can focus on something else while they're making that thing work like it's supposed to. So totally makes sense what you're saying.
Well, and as a leader, not only have you removed something from your plate, you've empowered someone else that you're teaching, which ultimately is leadership. That's our job, right? It's not just, what's the point of being a leader if we do everything ourselves and don't lean on the people that we're supposed to be leading?
That's right.
Doing this, you've now given someone the ability to do something that you've taught them, which is now it's like, all right, well, this is one less thing I have to focus on, so I can focus on the things to get to the 10X.
Yeah.
So it's all about this simplification, how we can simplify things. From the another example from the History Channel, John D. Rockefeller. I mean, he didn't just make oil better; he actually built the entire supply chain. So think about that. I mean, he built the entire supply chain just by simplifying and making one thing, focusing on one thing that was really, really, really good. And so the question from here is, what's your 20%? That's the key question, is what's your 20%? What are the things that you can simplify, of the things that only you can do the highest and best use of your time, so you can focus on the 80% results. Number two, what 10X does is it changes our identity.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? Now, this all has to do with what we think about. And if we're going to go 10X, we got to think a whole lot different than if we're just going to go 10X. If I want to go from 1 million to 10 million, if I want to go from 10 million to 100 million, and so on and so forth, then when you sit down and really think about it, you've got to change your thinking. I mean, you can't just think the way that you've always thought. So I mean, that we got to expand what we're doing, and a lot of times, and we've talked about this too. I mean, that goes from growing, learning, reading books, listening to podcasts. Which this is a great one, by the way.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, a shameless plug. But we have to change our identity. We have to think about, and we have to really, this is about what number one was creating margin, so that we can fill that up with something else, so that we can give ourselves the identity that we need to be able to go. And then number three, what this does is 10X really creates leverage. Okay, so we talked about this at the beginning. 10X is not working harder. 10X is building systems that work harder.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And we empower people, and then we leverage those strengths. When people talk about scalability and how do we scale? Then it's having systems. I mean, let's look at Apple. All right, now this is not from the History Channel, but guys, you probably know enough about Apple. Did Apple invent the MP3 player?
No.
What'd they do?
They built on it and made it something that everybody wanted to have.
Yeah, who would have ever thought that we've gotten rid of CDs and DVDs? I remember you having carrying those big CD cases around.
Yep.
That had, 100, 200 CDs in them, and now you got a device right here in your hand that can hold hundreds of thousands of songs at your fingertips.
Well, what Apple's done, not just with MP3, but they've taken things that we need to have in our daily lives that people need and have made them an extension of us. I mean, you think about it. They went from MP3 to, remember the shuffles that were like literally the size of a quarter, all the way up to now we have iPad Maxes that are back to carrying these big phones. But it's because we're doing more. Think about, people are carrying around the iPads like they are computers, and their creativity's through the roof. People are creating art, they're creating videos, they're creating whatever it is, they're reading from them. They're doing all, so they've scaled their products based on culture and what culture is doing. And that's why I feel like they've been successful in that they've changed their identity. I mean, who would have thought you would have gone from, remember, the iPhone was so tiny. Now everybody's like, well, I want the iPhone. I want the Max. Like, I want the big phone.
Yeah.
And so we've gone from the tiniest to the
well,
biggest.
hey, if you think about it, there's actually a phone on the iPad with FaceTime. So it does exist. Even you could have, I mean, who would hold
Now,
it up
Adam,
to
that's
your
not
ear?
like that iPad I saw you had the other day. That thing was tiny.
Look, I got it right here.
I'm
from my
talking
notes.
about- I'm
I
talking about
I
tiny.
get made fun of all the time.
mini.
They were like, why didn't you have an iPhone? Why do you need this? And I'm like, because I use it for everything. So
Benji, going back to what you said about the CD player, do you guys remember when Steve Jobs got on stage, what he said about the iPod? Do you remember what he said?
I remember watching the clip. I do.
He held up the iPod and said, I'm showing you guys, introducing a device to the market that puts 1,000 songs in your pocket.
That's it. Yep.
1,000 songs in your pocket. I think you would agree that Steve Jobs was a 10X thinker.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he had these visions and he, so anyway, what it does is it creates leverage. And again, he built a system. He had the idea. He had people around him that could that could take his vision and just take it to a whole nother level. So here's kind of the key takeaway is, 10X is easier. And Adam, we didn't say better, which a lot of times it is better, but we said easier because it forces clarity in what we're trying to do. When we get real clear, when we get real focused in what we're doing, then it gives us the ability to have that clarity. So, and what it also does is, so how do we take all this and apply it to, we're going to talk about an organization because I think we got a lot of business leaders on here, but there's really 3 key steps, and we'll go through this real quick. Identifying of what you can let go of. Okay, we've talked about that.
Yep.
Going back to the Pareto Principle, 20%. What is your 20%? Okay, and then number 2, focus on your unique strengths. So again, Benji, what you said before, what is the highest and best use of your time? And ask the question. Somebody comes to you and says, Adam, hey, can you do XYZ? Right? We've always heard the term that says when you say yes to something, that means you say what? To something else. No to something else, right? So asking ourselves the question as leaders, entrepreneurs, whatever the case may be, is that the highest and best use of my time? Mm-hmm. And then what this does is also helps us align with a bold vision. Thinking 10X is going to be a bold vision. I mean, it's going to, again, require us to think about things that are much more larger than we could imagine. And this is not going to take place by us working harder.
Yeah.
I used to think, well, maybe if I worked an extra hour in the morning, extra hour at night, man, I can really ramp up my productivity. And that's really not the answer.
No.
The
You're just
answer
wearing
is
yourself down at that point. You're burning the candle at both ends.
So the answer is, what am I working on the right things? Am I working on the things that only I can do? So hopefully this was helpful. Again, can't stress enough. Get the book and read it, listen to it. It's a long book. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's going to take some commitment. But guys, any final thoughts about just what we talked about today, and we'll give maybe some action steps for the listeners.
Adam, go ahead first.
No, I loved just the 3 pillars you talked about, especially the first one is, for me, as you were saying it, like for our watchers on YouTube, they're probably like, well, I'm like looking off because I'm thinking, like as I'm doing it, like I'm sitting here, you're talking about like identity of like identify what to let go. And especially for me in my position, that's the hardest thing that I'm in right now is we're training people and doing things. Not only do I have a passion and enjoy what I do, the meaning letting go means I don't get to do those things, but also it frees me up for some other things that we need to do around the church that need to get done. And I have to get comfortable, maybe even some of those Sundays or events where we're capturing things or working on things, not being the one that does it and being okay with it and being okay with things, maybe the quality's different or the shots are different or whatever's being captured doesn't look like what I normally would do. But if I don't put somebody in the position to actually practice it, they're never going to get to that point because they're never going to have that. The only reason I'm to the point that I got to is, I mean, even just using the two of you as an example, is everything we did, all the content we created for other Serpros, for our own Serpro, for marketing content, was the fact that y'all just said, hey, take it and go with it. Do it. You do it. I'm not, if it didn't fit your vision, you told me about it. But it wasn't like, hey, this looks like crap. It was like, hey, let's fix this. Can we do this better? Can we do this instead? So that was the biggest takeaway for me is, okay, what can I identify right now in my position? What can I let go of that empowers someone else that's eventually going to get me to where I need to, having a team that can do these things, having a team of talented photographers, videographers, just creatives in general. What are some areas right now that I can say, all right, I need to not hold that so tightly and let someone else, so I can get to that 10X, like you said.
Yeah. For me, it was, I mean, when we went through this exercise with our team and finally got to the end of it, I saw their eyes open up to go, I see exactly what you guys are talking about, because for me, it was like, yeah, I get my first thought was to go revenue. I mean, how do we go 10X revenue? I mean, that's, again, everybody does that. But I think that, it really helped us dial back. Okay, we can get there, but it's going to take a few things that we have to let go of each individually to let our team do. And again, for you listeners, you're probably thinking the same thing. No matter what size business you are, there are those things that you can let go of. Trust someone else to do it. You're paying them to do a job. Let them do their job. And still hold them accountable and give them the vision behind it. So that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, that's good.
So just for our listeners, just a couple things to questions to think about over the next 90 days. All right, think about what 10X looks like for you, and we'd love to connect with you. If you want to share with us what your 10X idea is, share with us on social media. Adam can tell you all the platforms we're on because I'm not sure that I exactly know. But we'd love to hear it. We'd love for you to engage with us. And again, get the book. Go to the History Channel. We don't get paid endorsements from these guys. It's all free. Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
10X.
10X.
But guys, before we close out, okay, I'm gonna throw you a little curveball here. All right. Would you like to hear a bad dad joke?
Do it.
Okay.
I hear these every Sunday. This is how Pastor Jeremy starts every message. So
all right. So I got an email the other day about how to read maps backwards. It was spam.
Spam. I knew. I've never heard that. That was great. It was spam. Hey, look, for you listeners out there, we just want to say thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate you guys. Hopefully, like you said, you'll take Brady's advice. Go get the book, our audio book or whatever. 10X is easier than 2X. And just give us your feedback. We're on all the social platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. If you're listening, please share this. Share this with someone that it could help impact them in their personal life or their business. And as we always say, go out and choose to live a higher up life. See you next time.